Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 18th of July, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Patrick Henningsen. Thank you, as always, for joining us, Pat.
It's great to be here, as always, Brian.
I'm glad we can offer you some sunshine, and apparently it's about 23.5 degrees outside, but you've described that as warm.
Yeah, that's just...
compared to Arizona.
Yeah, it's a mild heat.
Mild heat.
But for Plymouth, amazing. Really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've done our best, and we've got reports of sunshine over the rest of the country. We need some because, of course, the political situation in UK becoming ever darker and more gloomy until we, the public, start to do the right things to stop it. Now, you're going to concentrate on events in Turkey, Patrick. I thought what we would do was just introduce a couple of stories from mainland UK to reiterate how bad things have got in this country. This is deliberate, it's not accident, it's not a breakdown of ordinary people. This is a political agenda which is being drifted in to create chaos. So we'll start by reminding people that child abuse whistleblower Melanie Shaw is still in prison. She's back in Foston Hall prison. What is this lady's crime? Well, it's very easy. She blew the whistle on vicious abuse of children in Beechwood Children's Home, Nottingham. And she has always alleged that children were murdered on that site. There was no proper police investigation. But the moment that Melanie discovered Nottinghamshire police were simply lying over the investigation, she has been harassed, victimised, and ultimately locked up in prison. And we know that events in Nottingham are becoming ever more interesting, as it's quite clear that more information is coming to the surface, suggesting that high-level political persons were involved in the abuse of children in the Nottinghamshire area. So if you wanted a look at the UK government, Patrick, what is the standard of David Cameron, Blair, Gordon Brown, or Theresa May's British government? If you blow the whistle on child abuse, you can expect to be locked up.
I think if you blow the whistle on child abuse and anything else, that's going to get you a ticket into prison, apparently. This is what happens. This is the war on whistleblowers, Brian.
The war on whistleblowers, and of course that is because our politicians are so scared of the truth coming out. Well, if the politicians are scared, we should also bring in the church. And the Irish Times here, a very interesting story which I encourage people to go and have a look at. So Teresa Devlin, the chief executive of the Catholic Church Child Protection Unit, has had some interesting things to say. And this is in relation to clergy who've been caught abusing children. And she says, once you know he's guilty, then you have to cut the ties. You cannot continue to pay for someone, and at some stage the state has to take over with pensions. So you don't want the Catholic Church with the burden, get it over to the state. And then she goes on, we're still talking about those people in their 60s, because most of this abuse did happen around the 70s, 80s and 90s. So we're talking older people. And I'll just add here that from that, we deduce that it's move on, no abuse, nothing is happening now. But of course, it's all historic and in the past. But even if you have abused children, you still need a pension. And the Catholic Church seems to think that it's the Irish state that should be paying, which seems reasonable, do you think? Or maybe not. And if that is going on, then let's have a look at Police Scotland. The title of this Mail story was Potty, Police Hold eBay Seller for 4 hours because he didn't mail his £16 dinky toys after the buyer refused to pay the £6 postage. Now, this was the statement that's been made by Chief Inspector Andy Hutton. He's responsible for Police Scotland's custody arrangements, and he's had to apologise. I apologise unreservedly for any distress or frustration you have been caused. So Police Scotland a bit puzzled that they send, I think it was 4 officers to arrest this man, take DNA because there was a dispute which was not his fault at all over a £16 dinky toy. And they're saying, well, you might have experienced a little bit of frustration at being arrested, but we've apologised, so no problem. It's all gone away.
What an incredible waste of public resources.
By Police Scotland that can't investigate. Sorry, that one's popped up. We'll come on to that one in a minute. We can't investigate the Brian and Janice Doherty child abuse case. That's all gone quiet. But Police Scotland can put officers on the ground in order to arrest somebody over dinky toy. This can't be accidental, Patrick. This is a change in the professional thought process. These people are, well, reframed.
Well, so clearly the priorities of the force is not to catch real criminals. The priority is to spend your time and resources chasing non-events and non-criminals and commercial disputes, little internet purchases. I mean, kind of embarrassing but ridiculous, but it's beyond that, Brian. So it's completely dysfunctional, doesn't work, and like you said, it's not designed to work. The system, it's designed to protect high-level criminals. They're above the law. They're completely omnipotent, and then the police will chase everybody for petty non-crimes.
And producing fear, making people fearful. The police going to turn up on your door because you blew a wolf whistle at a woman. That's cropping up in Nottingham at the moment. So these are the key issues. So ordinary people just being suppressed, made fearful. Meanwhile, the high-level criminals simply do as they want. Well, let's have a look at this. This is a list of Daily Mail stories that I'm able to call up on my screen. And do have a look at this if you're finding it a little bit small to read. We've got gang-watched woman into pin in Waitrose, and they stole her purse and 21,000 of life savings. We've got long jetty woman loses 50 kilograms in 9 months. Builder bricks up barred windows on ladder balanced on open door. If you read through these stories, most of them are utter dross. And if that doesn't distract your mind, then of course the Daily Mail consistently has soft porn running down the edge of the stories to make sure that minds are distracted on anything but what the government is really doing. And we've singled out the Daily Mail here, but of course we can choose any of the other national newspapers. They're all using the same tactic of burying stories which have some merit in amongst complete nonsense.
That's where the Daily Mail makes quite a lot, majority of their revenue. In what they call it a content farm. This is what the Daily Mail is, a farming content. But then you go back to that slide real quick, Brian. You look at that right-hand column. That's where the revenue is for the Daily Mail. So one could make the argument that soft porn is subsidizing the news organization, but really it sends another message. The message is, look over here for a little while, but we really want you to look over here at Kim Kardashian and Paris Hilton's sex tapes or whatever. That's kind of like the subliminal subtext of what's going on there.
And this isn't accidental. This has got to be calculated. It's cold, callous, calculated. This is an attack on the minds of the nation.
Yeah, it's that, and also I'll have to say, Brian, another problem is print newspapers are struggling to stay relevant, to stay open, and then doing something in print and translating that online are two different businesses, two different operations, and the media is really going through a crisis. Identity crisis, a revenue crisis, a whole business structural crisis. And but the main problem is they're not doing their job, Brian. They're not investigating real crime. They're not holding politicians and public officials to account. They're not busting up any scandals. When is the last time any of these newspapers has got anybody fired from their public?
Well, I don't think you want to do that. They write balanced stories.
That was how we used to measure the success of a news organization. They would say, "Oh, how many people did you get fired this year?" And they'd boast about it back in the old days, Brian. That's when you had press. Now you have this thing called media. Media can be anything. Media can be infotainment, can be dross, can be a little bit of news.
Docudramas.
Yeah, and placed articles from the behavioral insights team, whatever. That's media. So it's not press, though.
Right. Okay. Well, we've done this deliberately because we've now taken our audience into that very murky pool of non-stories and soft porn. Meanwhile, what's happening that we need to focus on? And Turkey is a major event, isn't it?
Out of last week, it was the Nice terrorist attack on the Promenade d'Anglais. That was only, I think, on Thursday or Wednesday. Out of the frying pan into the fire. 48 hours later, a coup d'etat, a failed coup d'etat, to be more accurate, in Turkey. I can't underline the significance of this story, Brian. This basically took over the global news agenda for 48 hours, and for good reason. This is an incredibly pivotal country. This will affect our foreign policy in England, in Europe, Britain, Europe, and the United States, and NATO as well.
Yeah.
This will have dramatic effects on the EU military integration as well, in my opinion.
So we've got turbulence now everywhere. Turbulence in the relationship between Britain and Europe with Brexit, turbulence over the formation of the EU military, turbulence in NATO. Everything is being destabilized.
Syria policy, etc., and relationship with Russia. So let's look at how this coup went down. This is an extraordinary story, how this played out. So initial reports that the military, a faction within the military, had taken over control of key government buildings and civil functions. So this was the scene here. President Erdogan was on holiday in Marmaris, which is an island just south of Izmir on the Mediterranean coast, and then that's when the coup took place that evening on Friday. So go back to that slide. This is the president using social media. This is the same president who wanted to clamp down on free speech on social media, goes to Facebook using FaceTime here, and basically he calls somebody and they have a TV camera. He's talking to the public through someone's cell phone on the broadcast network, state broadcaster. So that's Erdogan saying to the people, this coup is illegal, go out into the street, you need to support the democratically elected government, and it worked. The people responded, they came out into the street, and then the next sign, this is a CNN Turk, this is a CNN affiliate in Turkey. That's their studio, Brian. I was watching the live feed on Friday night. The studio's empty, you could hear fighting in the background. I didn't hear any gunshots, but apparently earlier someone said that you could hear something like that. But
right.
Fighting going on, an empty newsroom, just broadcasting live on that network. It was extraordinary. And you could hear the tussling and the shouting and fighting in the background, which soldiers were trying to take over. The coup faction of the military in Turkey was trying to take over that and other broadcast networks.
Right.
So extraordinary drama. President Erdogan is in a hotel in Marmaris. I just translated this from Turkish media this morning. 3 helicopters with 25 people go to basically arrest him. And he magically, this is interesting, left 15 minutes before they arrived, but still a shootout took place at his hotel. 2 people were killed. And meanwhile, he escapes, regroups, flies back to Ataturk Airport with 2 F-16 escorts, lands at Ataturk Airport, and we'll show you what that looks like in the next slide.
So this is this one here. Right.
Well, now here's interesting. As this was breaking, Brian, NBC News in America, citing their U.S. military sources, are saying that Erdogan tried to get political asylum in Germany. He was denied and then off to London. So this is, to me, a fake story. This was planted by the U.S. establishment. Okay, so this gives us a clue as to who might be behind this failed military coup. And no word of this afterwards in the U.S. media. They were totally zipped about it. The people who pushed that story were NBC and the Daily Beast. And we have a slide from the Daily Beast, I think. It might be the next slide.
This one here, that's right.
This slide. So Erdogan seeks political asylum. This was what this article is about. They changed the headline, of course, afterwards to cover up their trail. So we have major media organizations, Brian, complicit in running disinformation in real time during a failed coup.
Yeah.
So these are the Daily Beast is a very shady media organization that masquerades as a media outlet. But if you look at who's behind them, the sort of people the money behind that organization, very shady. And now they've sort of come out of the closet during this coup to show who they really are.
And this is one of the things that we're continually warning about. Is you can see these organisations. Soros is often putting in a lot of money to what are politically controlled media outlets, which are skewing public opinion and views.
And with intelligence operatives embedded in the editorial rooms, quite clearly. That's how this story came to be. So, amazing story. So let's go look at the next image.
Well, these are the two guys, aren't they?
So as this is interesting, as Erdogan is heading back to Ataturk, I saw those reports coming on the live feed on Friday night late, and then all of a sudden we're waiting. I was waiting all night, Brian, for a statement from Washington. You know, what do they say about this coup? And it was tight-lipped until it looked like it was going south for the military. And then Obama and Kerry finally released their statement, saying they support the democratically elected government of Turkey. Okay, so they don't back the putsch takeover, but they did back the putsch in the Ukraine. It's interesting how this double standard exists.
So this is kicked off, and a lot of people, of course, say that the coup was actually started by American interests.
Yes.
It doesn't go right, so they hedge their bets for a bit, and then when it's obvious it's going to fail, well, let's come back to the right side of the line and support the existing regime.
That's what happened, as far as I can see, unless there's a double blind. So this man, who is this man? This is Fethullah Gulen. Now, he's been blamed as being the orchestrator of the coup. He's in exile in the United States. He's head of the Gulen movement. He is a very wealthy Turkish imam who was put in self-imposed exile in 1999 in the United States. Has very strong links, Brian, with the CIA. Fethullah Gulen does, and also Graham Fuller. And so this is interesting. And the Turkish military closed the Bosphorus Straits during this coup. So that would block Russian ships from going to Syria, for instance. So again, that is in the interest of the United States. Again, but anyway, President Erdogan had blamed Gulen publicly as being behind this coup, and his loyalists within the Turkish military. They've managed to keep this Gulenist network alive for many decades, okay? And so that means the U.S. kind of have a Trojan horse built into the Turkish military and into Turkish politics.
This man is very mysterious. If you research him, he works at a university. I can't remember off the top of my head which one. But he's there living very happily somewhere in the mountains of the state.
In the Poconos Mountains in Pennsylvania.
But very well connected with Turkey. And how does he do this? How does he run a life in America quite reserved behind the scenes, and yet he's got this fantastic connectivity with all of the political system in Turkey?
Go back to his picture real quick. Let's just look at him. So Erdogan himself is from a Gulenist school. But they had a falling out, political falling out in the late 90s, early 2000s. So although Erdogan comes from the Gulenist camp originally, they've split, okay? So Gulen is absolutely a creature of the CIA. That's undeniable, okay? Yeah. He wouldn't be there in the United States if he wasn't, because there were a lot of people against him getting a green card. They fast-tracked his whole green card, and Graham Fuller from the CIA, I think, is one of the people who basically was, championing this guy's case. This guy is the Trojan horse into Turkish affairs for the United States. So
right, now there's something else about him. I didn't get time before this news program to get into it, but when we have been researching organisations which are beginning to destabilise UK, and we were actually going down the trail of who is chasing children. They're always after children, schooling, adoption, fostering. And we were very surprised to come up against this man.
The Gulen Foundation.
Indeed, the Gulen Foundation. Now, in our chat room, as we're speaking, somebody is saying, well, of course, remember that this man helped put together the ideology to create David Cameron's Big Society. Now we've got something very, very interesting unfolding, because this mysterious Turkish power base in America linked to the CIA seems to have connections into Big Society, which, far from disappearing, which is what the British media would have you believe it was all nonsense, it's almost disappeared, is growing very quickly. So this man's got a finger in the pie in UK as well, it would appear.
And we should be asking, who is this man? Who is he affiliated with? What are the hundreds of billions of dollars that are behind him being spent on?
Yeah.
And how is that affecting us? We need to ask those questions. So here is the triumphant return of the Sultan himself, type Erdogan, pardon my pronunciation. So this is him coming off at Ataturk Airport. Triumphant scene. At this point, Brian, this is about, I would say, 2:30 in the morning. No, this is actually 4 in the morning. It's clear that the coup is failing, but skirmishes still persist. Bombs were let off in the Parliament building. People died. Okay, so it was a triumphant return for him, and there he is. So what's the result of this? Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah,
this is the following day, Brian.
Now this starts to give us an indication of how vicious things have been, and I'm sure are going to be, because the people who've been arrested are not in for a good time.
No,
this is a pretty horrific regime.
6,000 total arrests. This also includes 2,400 judges were dismissed. This is basically street torture and murder. I don't want to show all the images, but if you go to 21st Century Wire, you'll see some of the graphic images. The mobs pro-government or pro-Erdogan, his party, there they are meting out justice in the street. So beating and killing soldiers, low-level conscripts, Brian. So this is what
they will have done what they were told. This is one of the catches. But for people in the military, low level, they're going to obey the person who's got most authority over them.
That's right. And so why this should be concerning is this is an Islamist. Erdogan peddles a very potent brand of Islamic politics. Okay. And so these street mobs, you could say, are Islamist street mobs. Some might even call them Islamo-fascist street mobs, not unlike the mobs that we saw in the Ukraine, U.S.-backed neo-Nazi right sector, fascist street mobs, basically doling out justice on the street to people who are enemies of the new regime, or the regime itself, or the government, or whatever. So that's what we're seeing, very brutal retribution. So a purge is underway. Thousands of military people are now, there's talk of reinstating the death penalty. So we're talking about execution for treason, potentially, I don't know, mass executions, a few dozen at least.
Yeah.
This is really intense situation. So that's what's going on over the weekend, this massive Erdogan's revenge, this massive purge. And if we go now, we'll see this is
where it heads.
This is a quote from the man himself here. The uprising, which is the coup, is a gift from God to us, because this will be a reason to cleanse our army. So serious business here. Okay, so this is definitely being used to consolidate power on behalf of the Erdogan and his government and his party, which is an Islamist party. Okay. Now, traditionally, Turkey is a secular country, so based on the principles of Kemal Ataturk, upon independence in 1923, the Turkish Republic is founded on secular principles. Okay, so this has always been important for Europe and for the United States in their dealings with Turkey.
Yeah.
And now we see the first signs, Brian, that this might be the end of that era in Turkey. This might be the end of the secular republic. Now, there could be swings back and forth, but this is serious. The ramifications of this are already before the show. Right before the show, we didn't have time to include the slide, but John Kerry is already threatening that Turkey's membership in NATO could be jeopardized. This will have huge implications with regards to Europe.
But just to interject something here, we've got Turkey, which we can now see exactly how unstable that country is. We're going to say that foreign interests have got inside in order to help create the mayhem, CIA mentioned, but certainly American interests. And yet this is the country that just a few years ago, people were saying, well, we need to bring Turkey into the European Union.
Well, this year, actually.
Nobody knew that under the surface was this danger.
Well,
that can't possibly be true.
They should know by now.
Yeah.
So just to show you the effect of this, this was an image from the broadcast TV, courtesy of Sama TV. That is Erdogan carrying the coffin of someone who died during this coup, someone he actually knew, a friend of the family. Okay, he's there with thousands of people around him, no security, Brian.
Yeah.
The symbolism of this cannot be understated. He has reached now a level of popularity that is legendary now. The political endurance of this man to survive a failed coup, to carry the martyrs in the street afterwards. In this part of the world, this is really big. This is the legacy. That's the political dynasty.
So he's now got total control.
He will do his lustration, his purge. He will remove all opposition. He will probably crack down quite heavily on the press. He has a mandate from his core constituents, Brian, that is powerful. The symbolism of what's happened this week cannot be understated. Okay, this man is in a very, very strong position as a leader. Maybe an authoritarian one, but nonetheless, he has the backing of this new powerful new trend in Turkey, which isn't secular. It is definitely of Islamic flavor.
So I'll ask you the question, how's this going to affect relations between Turkey and Russia? You may be coming on to that. But
I will come on to that.
Right.
Well, it just so happens, and we'll talk about that, but only days before it was announced that Turkey would be meeting, Erdogan would be meeting with Vladimir Putin, patching up their differences. And Turkey had shot down a Russian plane last November. That was big news. That put their whole relationship on ice. Since then, sanctions, Turkish economy, tourism, flat, total failure. Hotels that used to charge 80, 90 euros a night are now offering for $30.
Yeah, and less now.
They can't get the business, okay? So this has affected, so I think there's been a realignment. There's been some sort of decision back in May and April that Turkey's like, we can't sustain this war with our neighbor Syria. We are facilitating a jihadist playground in northern Syria. We can't be at odds with Russia. And so there was a major shift that wasn't covered much in the media in May, that Turkey, Erdogan changing tact, basically, going east rather than west.
Right.
And this will have massive ramifications. Now, while all this was going on, you look at the next slide, this is what happened. While all this drama was going on over the weekend, this little thing happened. So what happened in Syria?
Sorry, just to interrupt you, Pat, according to our chat room there's a breaking news that Turkish Parliament evacuated after attack warning.
Yeah,
so
there's still a lot of...
This is going to go on, isn't it, for a while?
There's bomb threats, there's shootings, there's still a lot of things that are going on. So they're not out of the woods. However, in Syria, we go back to the slide, the Syrian army took a huge amount of ground in Latakia, in northwest Syria, and so defeating Al-Nusra positions. Major
I'm sure this can't be true because we haven't heard this on any other source, have we?
No, but this shows you, as the focus has been in Turkey, Russia and Syrian army have basically made massive headway.
Right.
And this is also coming at the same time. The U.S. is giving a little ground to Syria, to Damascus and Russia as well. This whole story is shifting right now, as away from what it's been doing for 5 years.
Yeah.
And shifting, and it's pivoting in a slightly different direction. So it's going to be interesting. Now, if we go to the next slide.
Where are we? Here we are.
So if you're looking for a motivation of why the U.S. would back a coup, this should be as obvious as any here. Vladimir Putin and Erdogan may meet in person for the first time, basically to patch up their differences. This would make Washington furious, okay, on so many levels. And on the NATO level as well, because Russia's meant to be the enemy of NATO, and they've been building up all these forces, as you've been covering, in the Baltic states as well. So this would have made them furious. So I think they did a snap judgment to do this coup, and it didn't work. So this is Obama's Jimmy Carter moment, although he probably won't be attached to this failure. This is probably done out of the Pentagon and the CIA. Complete failure by the U.S. This is what it looks like to me, and all the signs, the fake news stories about Erdogan trying to claim asylum in Germany, etc.
Pat, I'll ask you a personal question here, but as an American, how do you feel reporting that America is there doing this sort of dirty work behind the scenes? How does it make you feel?
It's become kind of just normal day-to-day affairs. You know, this isn't the first failed coup as well that the U.S. has backed. It backed many failed coups, successful and failed. But I think the world's changing, and I think Washington trying to impose a 1.0 20th century geopolitical system and mindset. And I think the world is changing now. That unfortunately, the people basically stopped an army military coup in Turkey for the first time. Turkey's no stranger to coups. They've had many over the years. But there's always been a hidden hand directing these coups. Yeah. And normally it's because the military would rein in an Islamic leadership in Turkey to maintain the principles of the Ataturk secularist doctrine. And that's always been the role of the military. And now, for the first time, they hit a brick wall. Things are changing, Brian. Yeah. In a big, big way. So if we'll go to the next slide here. What does this mean? This is what it means. It's about the battle for Eurasia. And if you watched our Insight episode with Mike Robinson, the Insight Battle for Eurasia, we will explain this with Alex Thompson and Eric Zeus. But this is about Syria, Turkey. This is really important. If the West, NATO, the U.S. cannot sustain a presence in Eurasia as a dominant entity, as a dominant agenda, then it will lose its world hegemony. This has always been the thinking for many years. We talked about this in the show, the Heartland Theory. So this is Zbigniew Brzezinski's Grand Chessboard. And this will have huge implications, at least in the short term, on the Grand Chessboard as Turkey moves closer to Russia. And maybe the Russians build a South Stream pipeline through Turkey. But what can Turkey do in this situation? What's Turkey always done throughout history, Brian? Play both sides. Play Europe.
Well, they're caught in the middle. Caught in the middle. But if you got Russia on your border, you'd do well to talk to them, wouldn't you?
No, they have thousands of years of experience in playing East and West, and they could easily hold Russia to ransom after that pipeline's built. It's endless, Brian. And this has always been the issue with this part of the world. And Turkey will play both sides. They will blackmail both sides if they have to. They see it as survival. They see it as going forward. They will try to exert their influence and their power more and more as this globalized global information society develops. Countries like Turkey will have a global voice now, and it won't be just a Middle East provincial ethnic interest. Now we live in a different world now. I think Russia's recognizing this a lot faster maybe than Washington is, and even Turkey to some extent, although they're projecting a kind of Islamic brand of hegemony in the region, which has a lot of people worried, especially in light of the ISIS crisis.
Yeah. Okay, take us in this one. So Boris Johnson steps onto the world scene. I mean,
I was waiting for Boris to comment as the coup was breaking all night, Brian. Now, finally, we got this one in the morning. This is a tweet from Boris Johnson. He said, "Very concerned by events unfolding in Turkey. Our embassy is monitoring the situation closely. Brits should follow the FCO website for advice." And then Tom Watson replies to him, "Boris, can you drop the link, please?"
Please give them the link.
So this is what's going on in Parliament.
We've got politicians talking to each other over Twitter. Yeah. And Boris Johnson is the man to manage this sort of event unfolding on the world stage.
Well, Boris didn't send this tweet. Look at it. This was done by probably his secretary. So it's good to know they've got a handle on this whole Twitter thing.
Yeah.
But there's Tom Watson. "Oh, right, Boris, can you drop the link, please?" Really not inspiring a lot of confidence. I was hoping for a statement about the coup, right, from the Foreign Secretary.
Discussion in Westminster, no, we don't do that anymore. Just Boris lets one of his minions get onto Twitter.
So what does Boris know about foreign policy? What does he know about foreign countries? What does he know about any of this stuff? I would say it would be like between slim and none.
But he's got an easy job because he's going to do as Israel tells him. He says that he's for the Zionist agenda, so Boris Johnson will do what is good for Israel.
So he won't have to think a lot, so that's always good.
But, okay. Well, we've got all that unfolding in Turkey. Migrants here, of course, terrible problem.
Well, this is directly related to the Turkish issue because Turkey is the thoroughfare for the migrant crisis. Okay. So this is going to continue. This is getting more volatile. This summer, we'll see more of what we saw last year, Ryan. And this is people drowning in boats. Lesbos and Greek islands totally besieged, can't cope, need to move the people on. Where do they move, Brian? Yeah. They're either being sent to Germany Holland or somewhere in Europe. Britain is taking quite a few Syrian refugees. Well, but the majority of these aren't Syrian, as we found out on our show. The majority of these are from Uzbekistan. They're coming from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
They're coming not just from Syria.
And we've still got a lot of people in this country that don't look behind the scenes as to what's causing the problem. They focus on the migration, on the immigration in particular, and they're not saying who is causing the problem, because this is the key to it, isn't it?
Well, our government's policy is the reason for this migrant crisis.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
Break up society.
So what they're going to focus on here is this story. You'll see a lot of this, and this is Europe migrant crisis. Cologne rape victim says she had an abortion. So they're really focusing on this. These are the really divisive, sensational, Daily Mail-esque news stories connected with the so-called migrant crisis. So they want to, those will be all front and center, pressed out, given a lot of airtime, because they want to get people angry at each other and sort of force a kind of a Brexit polarization situation like we've had.
So people just don't know where to look. Everywhere the public mind is directed is unstable. So there's nowhere to base what is a common sense look at events, why are these events occurring, who's driving it. Everything is just a turbulent mess.
Yeah, they like people to say, oh, those we got to stop those migrants, those Muslims, and we're a Christian country, and start that whole dialectic. The establishment's very happy for that to go on, because then they will be able to sort of compartmentalize the discussion and keep people from looking at what the government's doing. Because while people are fighting with each other and then
they're not looking at the big picture,
talking about an alien invasion, they're not looking at what's going on in their own government that's causing this so-called problem to begin with.
Bring in Theresa May, because of course we got a new Prime Minister. She had a little bit of trouble deciding which way to go in Downing Street the other day, but she's obviously been summoned to meet important people. So she's off to meet Angela Merkel. And she's also been having deep discussion with Nippy Sturgeon. Mm-hmm. So women coming into power here.
Yep, and so that'll be Theresa May's first foray into the foreign arena. She'll be going to bringing the leopard-patterned magic shoes. We'll be going to Berlin.
I've got the Theresa pen with me today, actually.
Oh, this is there it is, the same print there. So that's interesting. So she'll be going to meet Angela Merkel to discuss, among other things, the migrant crisis. So it for someone serious a problem as this, where Europe hangs in the balance, Britain, all this, NATO hangs in the balance. We have a brand new unelected Prime Minister,
of course,
who's going to talk about these issues. So clearly decisions are being taken care of behind the scenes, Brian.
Yep.
Other minds are working on the problem, and our politicians are just there for the photo ops. And to look good and
to push the agenda out for the public.
And to push the agenda, whatever that agenda that's been handed to them, say you need to push that. Can you do that, please, when you meet Miss Merkel? Okay, thank you. You need to say X, Y, and Z. These aren't real political leaders, Brian. These aren't statespeople.
No, these are the puppets. So. Okay, well, Patrick, thank you very much for taking us through this. We're looking forward to getting Alex Thompson on to go through some of the in-depth stuff around Turkey, and I know he's keen to talk to you on that. So whilst people's minds are distracted onto Turkey, what's happening in UK, a massive attack on us. My apologies, you've still got one here that we haven't just mentioned. Do you want to cover that? And I'll get where I'm trying to go.
Well, this is interesting. So the Nice attacks, we'll go back quickly to Nice. This just came out last night. This is interesting. So we just find out here, according to this report in the Telegraph, French police, vans that were blocking the promenade that this mad terrorist truck driver drove down, those police basically were told to stand down, and they left the street open.
And then the attack takes place.
Minutes before the attack takes place. So to me, this looks like a stand down order, Brian. And of course, I would be wanting a full investigation into this. Will we get that? Probably not. However, what we also found out was the so-called ISIS terrorist here was a bisexual, drug-taking Muslim. So not very committed to the ISIS principles, apparently. So is this guy really a terrorist, or what is the real story? I'm questioning.
Well, the knife being stuck in there, isn't it? You know, get all the labels in, drug taking, whatever.
We saw the same with Mohammed Atta and 9/11, all these so-called Muslim terrorists who aren't very religious. Doesn't really make a lot of sense in terms of the narrative that was pushed out at the beginning of it. What I'm saying is there's a lot more to the story than meets the eye.
Yeah.
And we should be asking more questions about it.
Okay, we'll dig into that. Right, so let's come on to the issue. What's happening in this country? Well, this is a stunning story. It's come out of the Mail. This one we followed through on Boarding School Association. And what have they got to say? Well, they've got this to say, that transgender children should be called Z, not he or she. Children should be addressed as they choose to be called. So if the child is not too sure as to whether they're a boy or a girl or something in between, they're going to tell the teachers what they would prefer to be called. And then Boarding School Association teachers are being told basically you're going to have to learn a new language. And what have we got here? There's official guidance to, quote, queer the education system. Now, this is real. This is not a joke. It's not April the 1st stuff. This is a massive attack on the minds of our children. And of course, the objective is to drag them into no man's land where can they form their own personalities. Well, where does it come from? Well, if you follow the Mail story through, it appears that it comes out of the Boarding School Association. This is one of the men mentioned, Alex Thompson, OBE, Director of Training, and so he's one of the people pushing the queer agenda. Interesting man, because this is part of his background, Chief Examinations Officer for Army Junior Officer Education and Training, Senior Education Advisor Officer Selection Board, so this is all military stuff, and he gets an OBE having been Director of Children's Services for British Forces Germany. So I thought this is a very, very interesting man. Interesting that he's being outspoken on the advantages of the queer agenda. But he gets support from this lady, Caroline Jordan, the head teacher of Headington School. And she's president of the Girls' Schools Association. And don't take any notice of body level 1. That's a typo there. That happens sometimes. Okay, and she said this, I do not want anyone to think that girls or boys' schools are invested in one way of being a girl or one way of being a boy. So even though you call yourself a girls' school or a boys' school, don't take any notice of that because we're going to go somewhere down the middle. And instead of saying girls go to lessons, staff should consider saying pupils go to lessons or students go to lessons. So if we believe the Daily Mail, we've got these two organisations pushing the agenda, and that's what's being sold to the public. But in one small point, they mention another organisation, and it's this organisation, and I encourage people to go and look. It's called Gendered Intelligence, and in fact, all of this drive and reporting has come out of this organisation. Interesting that Julia Middleton, A Common Purpose, is talking about cultural intelligence. Now we've got gendered intelligence. I think the message is if you don't agree with the government line, you're not very intelligent. You must go with this line if you're going to be intelligent. So what's this organisation got to say? Well, they are able to tell us what we've clearly not known for thousands of years, because societies haven't worked, have they, over thousands of years, because men didn't know whether they were men and women didn't know whether they were women. They say our identity as a man or woman is often taken for granted, but sex and gender come about through a combination of biological, social, and psychological aspects of life that build our individual identity. And then this is the classic, gender is not something you are or have, but is something that you do. So it's all become very blurred. I don't know how people have coped over the last, 10, 15,000 years, whatever it is, but they didn't have gendered intelligence, so presumably societies were confused.
So where does this term come from? I know you still got another slide.
This is the thing. Where does this come from? Well, let's bring in Jay Stewart, because he's the big boss of gendered intelligence. And if you read through his little CV there, co-founder, he carries out the main activities that take place across the organisation. They did a project with the Science Museum, but then you get into this and you find that they're working with the Wellcome Trust and the Tavistock Clinic. So here you are, you're at the heart of one of these funded organisations, the Wellcome Trust. Everywhere something's attacking society and families, we find the Wellcome Trust. And of course, the Tavistock Institute, masters at messing with people's minds to get whatever they want.
These are big social engineering institutions. In some cases, have eugenics ideological roots in some cases.
I think one of our viewers today will like it if I say, well, of course, that's the big society agenda. And isn't that interesting that we have Mr. Gulen there in that little field somewhere? But I'm just going to end on this, really, and do have a look at this website. This is a couple of the gentlemen who are advising. So these are the people who will be telling your son or your daughter that they've got identity issues, and they're going to be sorting them out.
And what makes them qualified to give that kind of
nothing
radical advice? I guess he's got a degree in French literature from King's College. That's good. That's kind of useful. And then what are the other one? British Film Institute, drama and speech and drama.
Yeah.
So what qualifies?
Occasional stand-up comedian.
What qualifies them to basically be pushing a radical social agenda?
They've got their own problems, and they believe that other people should be subjected to their problems to be normal.
And that qualifies you to basically go and sell whatever that agenda is.
Right. So just come back, if I may, to the Daily Mail. Of course, the Daily Mail totally misleading the public, because it makes out that the agenda came from the two people connected with the schools, but it didn't. It comes from the Wellcome Trust and the Tavistock Institute.
So that's the case of the Daily Mail not doing its job in terms of journalism.
Well, I think it's worse than that, because I think the person who put the article together knew exactly what they were doing. So while we've got these momentous events occurring in the world, where is the British mind being put at the moment? Well, we don't even know what sex we are.
The most offensive thing about this story, Brian, was the first slide. They're saying that children don't know what they are. They don't know if they're a boy or a girl. Children should be allowed to understand what they are, but not through the minds and the mouths of adults who are peddling a radical agenda on innocent children that are too young to understand the obsession with identity politics and cultural Marxist ideas and political correctness. That is the obsession of adults, not children.
Correct.
So children are innocent. Their minds are being twisted. This is screwing with kids' minds at an age when the kids should be enjoying life, playing, learning,
having fun.
Deciding what it's going to be in their lunch that day, not what gender they are. This is just beyond, Brian. It is really beyond the pale.
Patrick, we'll end there. There we are.
Sorry
what a contrast. No, it doesn't matter. We've got this massive attack on the minds of people in this country. It's happening in America as well, of course. And while we're distracted, we have criminal politicians unleashing the likes of the coup in Turkey. We'll leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us, and we will be back at the same time tomorrow. If you like what the UK column is doing, you like our news reports, we need your help. So if you're not a subscriber, please consider taking out a subscription or making us a donation. But as we always say, we can't do what we do without your help. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.